The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 14. Disapparation and Danger. Still one Thursday evening in late September, 1995. When he arrived in the Muggle living room, Lucius found Richard on the sofa, in his pants and an A-shirt, feet propped up on an ottoman, his hand digging in a bag of crisps. Lucius, what are you doing here? Why aren't you dressed? We need to go as quickly as possible. Sorry. Where are we going again? Richard worried that he had made plans with Lucius and forgotten. But no, the only plan he had made for this evening was to watch the Tottenham Spurs beat down Man U. Did your mark not burn? Lucius held up his arm. Sorry again. What? Never mind. Just get dressed. We need to go quickly. He is waiting. Geez, I just pulled in Newcastle. Linda's out for the night with her canasta club. Wouldn't you rather sit and watch the match instead? Lucius's eyes flitted across to the colourful rectangular box that moved with tiny little athletes in colourful kits. He had seen a football match once, having flown over one at night and stopped to watch. Yes, he would very much like to come back and watch some time, but tonight wasn't that night. We have to go! Richard huffed a sigh. Well, okie dokie. Give me a few minutes. 3 minutes later, he had put back on his dress pants from work, and a dark blue Oxford shirt. He rejoined Lucius, who, in spite of his terror, had indeed gotten sucked into watching the football match. Who's winning? The team calling themselves the Spurs scored 1 minute ago, Lucius answered, dusting off the crisp dust from his fingers. Damn, I missed it. Hopefully we're back before the evening report. Lucius only looked at Richard sternly. He tilted his head to the side, indicating the man should stand next to him. Lucius did not say anything. Hopefully we come back, he thought to himself, as he grabbed Richard's arm and disapparated. Richard's stomach was finally settling from their sudden disappearance in his living room and reappearance in this creepy place. He spent several moments with his lips clamped together, willing himself not to vomit. He looked around a bit to take in his surroundings. It was still dark and rainy, based on the sliver of outdoors he could make out from a nearby window. The room was sparsely furnished with outdated but ornate furniture. The room at this new place was crowded with several of Lucius's friends that Richard had met years before at the reception for them. He nodded hello to the man he remembered as Not. There was Perkinson, and the man named Antonin or Antonio he couldn't remember. Richard Granger never forgot a face, but he was shite for names. Rather than milling about and talking, however, everyone stood in a loose circle, extremely quiet. There were a couple of faces he couldn't quite place. However, it had been a large reception. Perhaps he hadn't been introduced to everyone there. He nodded hello to a short, balding man with prominent buck teeth. The man looked quite pale and was shivering as he held one arm close to his chest. He didn't look well, now that Richard looked at him properly. Then another man that he didn't recognize started to speak, and the small bit of noise in the room ceased immediately. I am pleased that you are here, that you still answer my call. You are my most faithful servants. There are some who would not or could not come. Those who refused will be dealt with. Richard's brow furrowed. What was this guy talking about? He couldn't see this man very well, seeing as they stood in a circle, and the man speaking was 2 to his right, only visible in profile. No one else seemed to want to look at him. In unfamiliar situations, Richard had learned to generally follow the lead of the people around him. The man between them, a large, heavy-set man whose name eluded Richard at the moment, partially blocked his view. From the corner of his eyes he could see that the speaking man looked rather washed out, as though he spent a lot of time indoors, away from the sun. Additionally, he had a very large overbite, Richard could tell from his profile. It probably should have been corrected by orthodontics when he was younger. The dentist who could never leave work at work thought to himself. Who was this man? Had they met at Malfoy Manor? They must have. Everyone else seemed to know him well. Now the man was walking, slowly, laboriously, as though his legs did not know how to work properly. He walked to his right, first, turning his back to Richard, Lucius, and the large man on Richard's right. As he passed the men, he offered each of them a murmured comment, a small nod, in return for their much more exaggerated bow. Next to him, Lucius appeared to be trying not to hyperventilate. Was he afraid of this man? How very odd. Why had they come here, if Lucius did not want to be here? As the man turned around the circle, greeting the people there, Richard took in his odd clothing choices. The robe looked to be too small, showing far too much leg and bare feet. Sticking out of a breast pocket was what was unmistakably a straw, from a McDonald's restaurant. Wizards really were a strange lot, Richard thought. When the man reached Lucius, Lucius performed the necessary bowing and scraping, murmuring quietly to the grey-faced man, "Lucius, so happy to know you have seen the error of your ways." And with this he turned to Richard. Their eyes met. Richard was shocked to see that the eyes were a bright red. Thankfully, years of military training, plus the nightmare dental situations of a fair few of his patients, meant that Richard's features never changed. "Who are you?" the man said to him. Richard Granger. Pleasure to see you again," Richard said confidently, warmly. He had finally decided that this man, who knew everyone here, must have been at the reception, only he missed introducing himself to the man. "Yes," the unusual man said. "Yes," the unusual-looking man said. Oh. Richard had been so focused on his recessed jawline and overbite that he hadn't noticed the man's lack of a nose. It was a shame how some people got so wrapped up in achieving a certain look through plastic surgery. This man looked as though his surgeon had literally cut off his nose to spite his face. "You might recall Richard from some of your more secret missions over the years, my lord," Lucius whispered quietly, between the odd-looking man and Richard struggled not to react. My lord. Lord! This man! He was that guy? Surely not! Did Lucius bring him to a home in the middle of nowhere to meet a dark wizard hell-bent on world dominion? The red-eyed man, Voldemort, his memory supplied from the conversations with his daughter, looked shrewdly at Richard, narrowing his eyes. Richard racked his brain, trying to find a way out of this situation. His military training kicked in. When in doubt, bluff. Yes, the secret missions. There were those in the north, and in London." Voldemort looked confused. His eyes contracted oddly, and suddenly it all clicked together for Richard. What seemed so off about him? The pale, clammy skin, the unsteady gait, the strained, wobbling voice, the bloodshot eyes. The man was suffering from addiction withdrawal, clearly. Richard wasn't sure how long he'd been using, but it seemed obvious to him now. Richard's mind was doing quick calculations. This man had disappeared sometime in the early 1980s. Based on the little he had read and things Hermione had mentioned to him, Voldemort had been born in the 1920s. There was one drug that was the gold standard for pain relief, and was heavily in use in those intervening years. It was a gamble, but when the stakes were high, Richard had been known to gamble.
"Perhaps you don't quite remember me. Morphine?"
The lean but muscular man gave Voldemort an easy smile.
"Perhaps you don't quite remember me. Morphine?"
Voldemort staggered backwards. It was a name he had not heard in a number of years. And yet the name was a linchpin, a touchstone that connected together so many actions and deeds that had followed. "Morphin, you're his son?"
Yes,"
the man said haltingly. Then he nodded as if to himself.
"Morphin's son."
What did he tell you?"
"Enough."
This man, Granger he had called himself, gave him a hard look. Voldemort nodded. He stepped back into his original spot in the circle, ignoring Crabbe entirely. "I am pleased to find everyone here. I trust that you will continue to answer my call when it comes. Tell no one what has happened here. Tell no one what you saw. All will be revealed when the moment is right." He looked around the room, lost for a moment, then spotted the one he sought. "Come, Wormtail." He pointed to the rat man, who limped quickly to his side. Putting one hand on the shorter wizard's shoulder, he dragged himself from the room. The men all stood there a moment in surprise, their eyes shifting to each other in confusion. Were they dismissed? Was that it? Voldemort had disappeared for almost 15 years, then showed up out of nowhere, called them, and then dismissed them 30 minutes later? How odd. "Come, Wormtail," Voldemort said, his unsteady gait carrying him from the room. He opened a door to the side of the dining room and went in. From inside the room came the unmistakable sound of a snake's hiss. Those closest to the room had the best view, and shuddered as they glanced inside. The door closed, and they were left alone. "Are we dismissed?" Crabbe asked Richard and Lucius. "Did you see that snake?" Raoul asked Jugson. Jugson grimaced and nodded. There were several cracks of noise as some of the men disapparated. Richard gave Lucius a calculating look.
"Back to my house?"
he asked the blond wizard. Lucius nodded without a word and held out his arm. Within seconds, they were standing back in the Grangers' living room. Richard's stomach protested violently, but to his credit, everything stayed inside. Lucius gave him an appraising look.
"Who is Morphin?" "Well, until tonight I thought they were a group of crime-fighting teenagers with a catchy theme song and matching jumpsuits." "Granger, you always speak in riddles. What are you talking about? You spoke with him. He said you were Morphin's son."
Richard knew when to play things close to the vest. Lucius had no idea what was going on, but he knew more than Richard did. Richard needed to level the playing field, and that meant withholding information until it was time to share.
"Morphin is between me and Voldemort. Does it concern you? Why did you take me there tonight?"
"Why?" Lucius stared beseechingly.
"Because we were summoned. Did you not feel your mark burn?"
He thrust his left arm towards Richard and pulled up his sleeve. Richard looked down at Lucius's arm and flinched. There was a mark there as well, but unlike his own tattoo of the caduceus symbol, meant to recognize his part in the medical field, this tattoo, well, almost like a brand, really, featured a sinister skull, the snake writhing about animatedly. He didn't know what this thing was called, but but it certainly gave the impression of evil. As he looked down at this mark, suddenly several puzzle pieces fell into place at once. Lucius's deference towards him, his desire to impress Richard and his family, his belief that Richard was a secret agent. He hadn't meant an agent of the Muggle military. He meant this one, Voldemort's army. And based on the fact that Lucius was marked this way, it meant that Lucius was part of that army. Richard could not tell the truth to this man. Hermione had impressed upon him the gravity of the situation between Voldemort and her friend Harry Potter. This dark wizard and all of his associates were dangerous. Luckily, they had no idea who they were dealing with.
"Lucius, I need you to leave. I have a secret mission from—"
"The Dark Lord has given you a secret mission?" There was a note of disbelief and jealousy in Lucius's voice.
"Yes, it's from the Dark Lord."
"What is it?"
"I could tell you, but then I would have to kill you," Richard said smoothly. "Look, just meet me here next Wednesday night. Linda has yoga, let's say 7:20 at night. Come to the front door and knock. Please don't just appear, yes? You scared the living daylights out of me."
"My apologies, Lord Granger," murmured Lucius with a small bow. Richard rolled his eyes as the wizard popped away. He couldn't decide if this was going to be the worst thing he'd ever done, or the funniest. He just needed to make sure it wasn't the last thing he ever did. He checked his watch. About 30 minutes before Linda would be coming home, ready to share with him all the latest gossip and funny stories from her canasta night. Just enough time, then. He hurried down the basement steps and stood in front of the metal bookcase that held boxes of old sporting equipment, camping gear, and trophies from their younger years. He squatted down and pushed aside the box of table tennis paddles, badminton gear, and bocce balls. He pulled a small paperclip from his pocket and inserted one pointed end of it carefully into a nearly imperceptible hole on the wall behind where the box had sat, low to the ground by the baseboard. One of 2 electrical outlets nearby swung open, revealing a 10-digit keypad. Within a few months of them moving into this house, Linda had complained that this outlet did not work, so Richard had installed a second one next to it that would. Now the family just treated this additional outlet as one of those strange quirks, a little eccentricity of electricity. If guests tried to plug anything into it, they were quick to tell them, no, that one doesn't work, try the one next to it. But it did work, just not in a way that anyone but Richard knew about. He put in the 37-digit code that he knew from memory. Behind him, a click and a creak, as a series of high-strength magnetic locks released, and the shelf moved perceptibly away from the wall around it. Richard grasped the back edge of the bookcase and pulled, revealing a short, dark corridor. He slipped inside and pulled the door closed, mindful that none of the items on the shelf were disturbed. He flipped a light switch, and the room came into view. An array of weapons lined one wall from floor to ceiling. A wardrobe filled with various suits, hairpieces, and shoes, as well as weather-dependent clothing like heavy-down parkas and waterproof boots stood in the corner. One section was devoted entirely to scuba gear. A large shelf full of various gadgets sat along the back wall. On it was all manner of things: binoculars, listing devices disguised as packs of cigarettes, document scanning devices that looked like a tin of breath mints, GPS trackers disguised as a set of keys, eyeglasses with cameras at the temples, packets of gum with switchblades inside, flashbangs that looked like a tin of mints, night vision goggles, fountain pens with invisible ink, recording devices that looked like watches. Richard reached inside of a box on a shelf and withdrew a small mobile phone. After a second, he thought better and took another one. He didn't want Lucius calling the house phone, or his regular mobile device. Now, he sat down in the leather chair at the desk in the center of the room. Opening a drawer full of paper clips, staples, and other supplies, he reached to the drawer's underside and pressed a discreet button with the pad of his forefinger. A disembodied female voice said, "Welcome." "Authorization 53, Whiskey Alpha Tango 79486, Oscar Kilo, India Echo." There was a whirring, a series of calculating beeps, then a chime. "Hello, Danger Mouse." It was a warmer, human voice this time. "Hiya, Susan. I was wondering if you could get a message to Lobo for me." "Absolutely." "Tell him to meet me at Ethel's pub, near the bar. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. "I'll tell him." "Thanks. Can you also put in a call to Wix? Ask them to get in touch." "Wilco." Richard pressed the button again, and the connection cut out. He leaned back in his seat, rubbing his forehead with the pads of his fingers. He hadn't had much of a desire to move in these circles any more. Everyone who mattered at MI6 nowadays knew that Danger Mouse had essentially retired to the quiet civvy life. But when he was called in for special assignments, or more rarely when he called them, they always answered. A perk of being a top agent back in the day. He'd taken on a few short assignments for them in the last couple of years, nothing that took him away from home too long. He was always able to explain it away to Linda, as his mother's cousin in Cardiff, needing some help repairing a chicken coop or some other such nonsense. One previous time he had needed to contact them was 4 years prior, when an unusually dressed woman had appeared on their doorstep with a letter for their daughter. His request at agency headquarters for more information on the subject evidently triggered a certain response, and a special agent got back in touch with him, someone that worked on both sides. On the MI6 side, she was known by the code name Wix. On the other side, she held a position called an aura. The person named Wix arrived shortly at the house and had confirmed what the professor had told them. Then she said that she had obliviated everyone who wasn't on a need-to-know basis. Essentially, everyone in the chain that linked them to her. He hadn't needed to contact them again until now. But now he really needed them. "Good grief," he said to himself. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.